In 1962, a pound of bologna cost 39 cents and fed a family of 5 for 2 days. Nobody was ashamed of it. Number 7 fed 3 shifts of factory men off the same skillet. Number 1 was scored, glazed, and baked until the whole neighborhood swore you had bought a ham. These 25 dinners built the American working class, then vanished the moment we could afford steak. Let us count down the 25 forgotten, poor man Bologna dinners every 1960s family remembers. Number 25, fried bologna sandwich. Every working class kitchen in America had a fat red roll of bologna in the ice box, and this was the meal it existed for. Your mother cut the slices thick, a 1/4 inch at least, and made 4 little cuts around the edge of each one so the meat would not dome up into a dome in the hot skillet. The bologna hit the cast iron and started to blister, curling and browning at those little notches, filling the whole house with a smell that brought kids in from the yard before she even called them. 2 slices went between white bread with a squeeze of yellow mustard, and if there was a slice of cheese, that was Christmas. A pound of bologna ran about 35 cents in 1961 and fed the family twice. This was not a snack. It was supper. Men ate it after 10-hour shifts and children ate it before school, and nobody thought less of anybody because the whole street was eating the same thing. Number 24, bologna and eggs. Breakfast for supper was the poor family's secret weapon, and bologna and eggs was the crown of it. Your mother fried 3 or 4 thick rounds until the edges crisped, then cracked the eggs right into the grease those slices left behind. The eggs took on the salty, smoky flavor of the bologna as they set, the whites lacy and browned around the edges. Served with a slice of buttered toast to mop the plate, this was a hot, filling meal that cost almost nothing. Eggs were about 50 cents a dozen in the early 60s, and half a roll of bologna finished the job. Farm families made it after evening chores. City families made it on the last night before payday when the refrigerator was down to the reliable things. It tasted like a diner counter, and it took 8 minutes, and it asked for nothing you did not already have on the shelf. Number 23, creamed bologna on toast. The soldiers had a name for this you could not say in front of your grandmother, but the meal itself was pure kitchen genius. Your mother chopped bologna into little squares, stirred it into a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, and let the whole thing bubble until it turned thick and creamy. Then she poured it steaming over 2 slices of toasted white bread and watched the bread go soft under the weight of it. The salt from the bologna seasoned the whole sauce with no extra effort. A veteran home from Korea recognized it in a heartbeat because he had eaten a version of it on a base somewhere, and now here it was on a Tuesday in Ohio, feeding his own kids. It stretched a few slices of cheap meat into a plate that stuck to your ribs. Today the toast is gone, the sauce is gone, and the memory lives only with the men who ate it in mess halls. Number 22, fried bologna and potatoes. This was the skillet that fed the whole table on $1. Your mother sliced cold-boiled potatoes, or sometimes raw ones cut thin, and laid them in bacon grease with a chopped onion until they crisped golden at the edges. Then she added torn-up pieces of fried bologna and let everything cook together until the potatoes soaked up the meat flavor and the onion went sweet and soft. A little salt, a lot of black pepper. And that was the whole meal. Potatoes came for pennies out of a 50-pound sack, the onion came from the garden, and the bologna stretched further than any of them. In coal towns across Pennsylvania and West Virginia, this was Wednesday night, straight out of the pan, eaten with a fork standing at the counter half the time. The children fought over the crispy bits stuck to the bottom of the cast iron. Nobody called it hash browns. They called it dinner. Number 21, Bologna salad sandwiches. Rich folks had ham salad. Poor folks had this, and honestly, nobody could tell the difference once it was on the bread. Your grandmother ran leftover bologna through a hand-crank meat grinder, the same one clamped to the edge of the kitchen table, then mixed the pink crumbles with sweet pickle relish, a spoonful of mayonnaise, and a little mustard. It came out as a spreadable pink salad, tangy and rich, and she piled it thick on white bread for lunches, church potlucks, and card nights. A pound of bologna ground down into enough spread for a dozen sandwiches. It kept in the icebox for days, and only got better as the pickle worked through it. This was the sandwich packed into lunch pails and wrapped in wax paper for kids walking to school in the cold. Deli counters sell fancy versions now under fancier names, but this started as a way to use up the heel of the bologna roll before it went bad. Number 20. Bologna and pork and beans. When the can of pork and beans needed to become supper for a whole family, bologna was the answer. Your mother cut the bologna into cubes or half moons, browned them in a skillet, then stirred in a big can of pork and beans, and let the whole thing simmer until the meat plumped and the sauce thickened around it. A spoonful of brown sugar or a squirt of ketchup gave it depth, and a shake of mustard cut the sweetness. A can of beans was about 15 cents, and half a roll of bologna turned it from a side dish into a plate that filled a working man up. Served with a slice of white bread to sop the sauce, this was a Friday night standby across the industrial Midwest. It cooked in one pan, it reheated even better the next day, and it fed 4 people for well under $1. The kids called it cowboy beans and never knew they were eating the cheapest meat in the store. Number 19. Baked bologna cups. Here is where a curl became a feature instead of a flaw. Your mother took those thick slices of bologna, the ones that always domed up in the pan, and pressed one into each cup of a muffin tin. In the oven, the edges curled up into a little bowl, a golden brown cup of meat. She filled each one with a scoop of leftover mashed potato, sometimes topped with a pinch of grated cheese, and baked the whole tray until the potato browned and the bologna crisped. Out they came, a dozen little edible cups that looked like something from a fancy magazine, but cost almost nothing. Children thought they were the most exciting thing on earth, individual portions all their own. This showed up in community cookbooks across Indiana and Illinois in the early 60s, usually credited to some woman named in the church directory. It turned 2 of the cheapest ingredients in the pantry into a supper that felt like effort and abundance, and neither. Number 18. Bologna and macaroni casserole. Long before boxed dinners took over, your mother built a casserole out of a box of elbow macaroni, a can of tomatoes, and a roll of bologna, and it fed the whole family with plenty left for lunch. She boiled the macaroni, cubed and browned the bologna, then folded everything together with the tomatoes and a handful of cheese if the budget allowed, poured it into a baking dish, and baked it until the top turned bubbly and brown. The macaroni doubled the volume of the meat for almost nothing. The tomatoes gave it brightness. The bologna gave it salt and body. A whole casserole cost maybe 50 cents and fed 6. This was the dish that showed up when company came unexpectedly, dressed up just enough with a sprinkle of cheese to look intentional. It sat in the center of the table steaming, and everyone got a full plate, and nobody asked what the meat was because everyone already knew and everyone was grateful. First pattern break. Here is where the truth about bologna gets interesting. That red roll in the icebox was not a fallback, it was a strategy. Bologna kept for weeks without spoiling, which meant a family could buy it on payday and eat off it until the next one. It came already cooked, so a mother with 3 kids and a job could put a hot meal on the table in 10 minutes without handling raw meat or worrying about it turning. It took to a skillet, an oven, a pot, or a sandwich with equal ease, which meant one cheap ingredient could become a different dinner every single night of the week. Working families were not eating bologna because they lacked imagination. They were eating it because it was the single most flexible, forgiving, shelf-stable protein a poor kitchen could stock. Every dish on this list is really the same act of intelligence performed over and over, turning 39 cents into a family supper without anyone at the table feeling shortchanged. Number 17. Grilled bologna and cheese. The grilled cheese got a promotion the day someone slid a slice of fried bologna inside it. Your mother browned the bologna first, then built the sandwich on buttered white bread with a slice of American cheese on either side of the meat so it glued everything together. Into the skillet it went, pressed flat with a spatula until the bread turned deep gold and the cheese oozed out the edges and crisped on the pan. Cut on the diagonal, it was a hot lunch that felt like a treat, the salty meat cutting through the melted cheese. A single sandwich cost a nickel or two to make, and it filled a child up until supper. Diners charged real money for this by the 70s and called it a specialty. In a 1963 kitchen, it was just what you made when the soup was gone and the kids were hungry and there was still bologna and cheese in the box. The smell of it browning meant somebody was taking care of you. Number 16. Bologna hash. Corned beef hash got the fame, but bologna hash fed a lot more families. Your mother diced cold-boiled potatoes and leftover bologna into small cubes, added a chopped onion, and pressed the whole mixture flat into a hot, greased skillet. She let it sit and crisp without stirring, then flipped it in sections so a brown crust formed on both sides. Topped with a fried egg, if there was one to spare, this was a full plate built entirely from things that would otherwise have gone to waste. The genius was in leaving it alone long enough to crust. A mother who stirred too much got mush, and a mother who stirred too little got dinner. Fatback or bacon grease gave it richness, salt and pepper did the rest. This was a Monday meal, the day you cleaned out whatever Sunday left behind. It cost nothing because it was made of remainders, and it tasted better than most things people paid for. Number 15. Bologna and sauerkraut. In the German neighborhoods of Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, this was comfort in a pot. Your mother browned thick slices of bologna, then piled a drained can or bag of sauerkraut right on top, added a splash of water and sometimes a pinch of caraway seed, and let it all simmer together until the kraut went soft and the bologna soaked up the tang. The sourness of the sauerkraut cut through the fatty richness of the meat, and the two balanced each other perfectly. Served over boiled potatoes, or with rye bread on the side, it was a cold-weather supper that warmed a person from the inside. Sauerkraut was cheap, and it kept forever, and bologna was the smoked, salted meat that made it a meal instead of a side. Old German grandmothers made this without a recipe, by feel, the way their own mothers had. It has all but disappeared from American tables, traded away for things that cost 5 times as much and comfort half as well. Number 14. Bologna and rice skillet. When the potatoes ran out, rice took over and bologna carried it. Your mother browned cubed bologna with a chopped onion, stirred in a cup of rice and a can of tomatoes or a splash of broth, then covered the pan and let it steam until the rice drank up every drop and turned tender and savory. Everything cooked in one skillet, which meant one pan to wash and one burner going. The rice stretched a small amount of meat across a whole family, and the tomato gave the plain grains something to hold on to. A cup of rice cost a few cents, and a handful of bologna finished it. This was the meal in rural kitchens far from a grocery store, the kind assembled entirely from the pantry when there was nothing fresh in the house. It was warm and filling and forgiving, and a mother could walk away from it for 10 minutes to fold laundry while it did its own quiet work on the back burner. Number 13, Bologna and egg noodles. This was the poor family's version of a creamy casserole made on the stovetop in 20 minutes. Your mother boiled a bag of white egg noodles, drained them, and tossed them back in the pot with browned cubes of bologna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a splash of milk to loosen it. Frozen peas went in, if there were any. The whole thing turned creamy and rich, the noodles slick with sauce, the bologna providing salty little bites throughout. A can of soup was about 15 cents, and it turned a bag of noodles and some cheap meat into something that tasted like Sunday. This was the weeknight dinner across the whole Midwest, the one a mother could make with her eyes closed after a long day. It reheated perfectly, which mattered when a single pot had to cover 2 nights. Nobody photographed it, nobody wrote it down. It just fed people quietly for years, and then it was gone. Number 12, bean and bologna soup. When the ham bone was long gone and the beans still needed a meat to carry them, Bologna stepped in and did the job for pennies. Your mother started a pot of navy beans soaked overnight, added an onion, a carrot, and a fistful of diced bologna, and let it simmer for a couple of hours until the beans broke down and thickened the broth into something silky. The bologna gave up its smoke and salt into the pot the way a ham hock would, only cheaper and always on hand. By supper time, the whole kitchen smelled like a diner, and a single pot fed a family for 2 or 3 days. Served with cornbread crumbled right into the bowl, it was a full meal that cost less than a quarter a serving. This was the soup for the coldest weeks of winter, the ones when the paycheck did not stretch and the wind came through the window frames. It kept people warm and full, and it never once ran short. Before we get to number 11, you can grab our cookbook bundles on our website and make every one of these channel recipes at home. Pause to scan the QR code on the screen or tap the link in the description or pinned comment. Number 11, fried bologna with red-eye gravy. Down south, they took a trick meant for country ham and used it on bologna, and it worked just as well. Your mother fried thick slices in a hot cast iron skillet until the edges curled and browned, then set the meat aside and poured a splash of strong black coffee right into the sizzling pan, scraping up every bit of browned flavor stuck to the bottom. The coffee bubbled and reduced into a thin, dark, reddish gravy with a bite to it. Sopped up with a biscuit or poured over grits, that gravy turned cheap lunch meat into a breakfast for supper that tasted like it had cost real money. The coffee cut the salt of the bologna, and the bologna gave the coffee something to hold. It used nothing that was not already on the counter that morning. In the Appalachian Hollows and the mill towns of the Carolinas, this was how you made Bologna feel like an occasion. Number 10, Bologna and cabbage. 1 head of cabbage and half a roll of bologna made a supper that fed a family for 2 days for under $1. Your mother chopped the cabbage rough, browned sliced bologna in the bottom of a heavy pot, then piled the cabbage on top with a splash of water and let it steam down until it went silky and sweet and picked up the smoke from the meat. Salt, pepper, and maybe a pat of margarine finished it. A head of cabbage cost about a dime and kept for weeks in a cool cellar, and bologna was the cheapest way to make it a meal instead of a side. For a family stretching every penny, this was a pot that just kept giving, reheating better each day as the flavors settled. Polish and German families across the industrial belt made it all winter long. It required almost no money, almost no skill, and almost no effort, which is exactly why it fed so many people so well for so long. Number 9. Bologna and fried onions on white bread. Simple as it sounds, this was a beloved hot sandwich in 1,000 working-class homes. Your mother sliced a big onion thin and cooked it slow in bacon grease until it turned soft, brown, and sweet. Then pushed it aside and fried the bologna in the same pan until it blistered. She piled the meat and the mountain of caramelized onions between 2 slices of white bread with a swipe of mustard, and the whole thing dripped and steamed and smelled like heaven. The sweetness of the onions against the salt of the bologna was the entire point, a cheap flavor trick that made a nickel's worth of ingredients taste like a diner special. Men carried this in lunch pails, wrapped tight so the grease would not soak through. Kids came running when they smelled the onions going. It cost almost nothing, and it satisfied like something far grander. Today, we would call it elevated. In 1962, it was just Thursday. Number 8. Bologna spaghetti. When there was no ground beef for the sauce, Baloney made the whole plate of spaghetti feel like a proper meal. Your mother cut the bologna into thin strips or little squares, browned them in the pot, then added a can of tomato sauce, a shake of garlic and oregano, and let it simmer while the spaghetti boiled. Tossed together, the bologna provided the meaty, salty bites that made it feel substantial, and the sauce clung to everything. A box of spaghetti cost a dime, a can of sauce a bit more, and half a roll of bologna finished a dinner that fed the whole table with seconds for anyone still hungry. This was the spaghetti of families who could not spring for hamburger that week, but were not about to serve their children bare noodles. The kids never questioned it. It was red, it was warm, it twirled on a fork, and there was meat in it. That was everything a plate of spaghetti was supposed to be. Number 7. Bologna scramble. This was the meal that fed 3 shifts of factory men off the same skillet, because a mother could make it fast and big and any hour of the day. Your mother diced a good amount of bologna, cooked it until it crisped, then poured in beaten eggs and scrambled the two together into a soft, salty, protein-heavy pile. Sometimes a handful of leftover potatoes went in, sometimes a little onion, sometimes a slice of cheese folded through at the end. Served on toast or straight off the plate, it filled a working man up and got him out the door. Eggs and bologna were 2 of the cheapest proteins in the store, and together they made a meal that cost pocket change and delivered real staying power. A man coming off the night shift ate it at 7 in the morning. A man heading to the day shift ate it at 6. The same pan, the same food, feeding the family in waves all day, every day. Number 6. Bologna steaks and brown gravy. Here is where bologna put on airs and got away with it. Your mother took thick slices, a ½ inch each, scored the edges, and fried them until they browned and firmed up like little steaks. Then she made a gravy right in the pan, stirring flour into the drippings and pouring in milk or water until it thickened into a rich brown sauce. The bologna went back in to simmer and soak it up, and the whole thing got ladled over a mountain of mashed potatoes. Suddenly, the cheapest meat in the store was smothered in gravy and sitting on the plate like a Sunday roast. Farmers called this poor man's steak and ate it without a trace of embarrassment. A roll of bologna cost a fraction of a real cut of beef, and the gravy stretched it across the whole family. Every bite carried the meat and the potato and the sauce together. It was heavy, it was filling, and it satisfied in the deep way that only starch and fat and salt can. Second pattern break. Here is something the grocery chains would rather you not think about. The reason these meals have vanished is not that they stopped tasting good. It is that nobody can build a business on them. There is no brand loyalty in a roll of bologna, no advertising budget behind a bag of egg noodles, no profit margin worth chasing on a can of pork and beans. The dishes that kept the American working class fed and independent were made of exactly the ingredients that stores cannot mark up and companies cannot dress up. So instead, they sold us frozen dinners at 4 times the cost and half the nutrition, and they taught us, slowly over a generation, to feel a little embarrassed about the food our grandmothers made without shame. The embarrassment was the product. Once we felt it, we stopped cooking the cheap thing and started buying the expensive one, and a whole library of kitchen intelligence quietly slipped out of the family and was gone. Number 5. Bologna and pinto beans with cornbread. In the mountains south, a pot of pinto beans was the meal, and Bologna was how you made it Tuesday instead of Sunday when there was no ham hock to be had. Your grandmother soaked the pintos overnight, then simmered them all day with a chopped onion and a good amount of diced bologna, which gave up its salt and smoke into the pot the way a piece of fatback would. By supper, the beans had broken down at the edges, thickening the pot liquor into something dark and rich. A skillet of cornbread baked while the beans finished, and you crumbled it right into the bowl and ate the whole thing with a spoon. Pintos cost about a dime a pound, and bologna was the cheapest meat on the shelf, so this pot fed a big family for next to nothing across 2 or 3 suppers. In Kentucky and Tennessee, this appeared on the table 5 nights a week, and it built generations who never once asked for anything fancier. Number 4. Bologna stew. When the beef for the stew pot was out of reach, bologna carried the whole thing, and hardly anyone at the table could tell. Your mother cut the bologna into chunks, browned it, then added diced potatoes, a chopped onion, a couple of carrots, and enough water to cover, and let it simmer until the potatoes started to break down and thicken the broth. A can of tomatoes brightened it, salt and pepper finished it. The bologna gave the whole pot its meaty, smoky backbone, and the vegetables did the rest. This was the clean out the crisper meal, the one built from a soft potato, a limp carrot, and half an onion wrapped in wax paper, plus whatever bologna was left in the box. A single pot cost under $1 and fed the family for 2 days, reheating richer each time. It fogged up the kitchen windows and made the whole house smell like somebody was taking care of dinner. Nobody wrote it down. Everybody just knew it. Number 3. Bologna and macaroni and tomatoes. This is not mac and cheese, and it is not spaghetti. It is something plainer and more honest than either. Your mother boiled a box of elbow macaroni, drained it and tossed it back in the pot with a can of whole tomatoes broken up by hand, cubes of browned bologna, salt, pepper, and a knob of margarine. That was it. The tomatoes coated the macaroni in a bright, acidic, savory sauce, and the bologna gave every few bites a hit of salt and smoke. A can of tomatoes was about 12 cents, a box of macaroni a dime, and the bologna stretched it into a meal for the whole table with lunch left over. Every grandmother in the rural Midwest and South made this, and church cookbooks listed it with barely any instructions because everyone already knew how. It was filling, it was cheap, and it was faster than boiling water plus 10 minutes. We replaced it with jarred sauce and boxed dinners and never noticed the loss. Number 2. Fried bologna and grits. In the Deep South, breakfast and supper were the same meal for a lot of families, and this was one of the best of them. Your grandmother cooked a pot of grits until they were thick and creamy, stirred in a pat of margarine and plenty of salt, then spooned them onto the plate beside 2 or 3 thick slices of bologna fried crisp and curling at the edges. The grits were soft and mild, the bologna salty and browned, and a runny fried egg on top pulled the whole plate together. Grits cost almost nothing by the pound, and kept forever in the pantry, and bologna was the cheapest meat in the store, so a family could eat this any day of the week without thinking twice. It was warm. It was heavy. It stuck to your ribs and got you through a morning of hard work or a long, cold night. In 1,000 kitchens from Georgia to Mississippi, this was the plate that meant home. Number 1, baked bologna, the poor man's ham. At the top of the list is the dish that turned the cheapest meat in America into a Sunday centerpiece and fooled half the neighborhood while it did. Your grandmother took a whole thick chub of bologna, scored the top in a diamond pattern the way you would a real ham, studded it with a few whole cloves, and painted it all over with a glaze of brown sugar and mustard. Then she baked it slow until the outside caramelized into a deep, shining mahogany crust, and the whole house filled with a smell that sent the kids to the window. She sliced it thick at the table and served it with mashed potatoes and canned green beans, and it looked, for all the world, like a holiday ham. A whole roll of bologna cost $1 or less and fed the entire family with leftovers for sandwiches all week. This was the meal that let a poor mother set a proud table, the one that said, "No matter how thin the paycheck, we eat well in this house." Nobody at that table was fooled exactly. They just understood what she had pulled off, and they loved her for it. That is the meal we should remember most. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Just one. The fried bologna and potatoes, the baked bologna ham, the pinto beans with a little bologna cut in. Then come back and tell me if your grandmother was just making do, or if she actually knew something we forgot. Because these were never meals of defeat. They were a whole way of feeding people with dignity, and we let it slip away the moment we could afford to. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments. I want to know if the baked bologna ham gets more love than the fried bologna and grits.